Hi there, everybody. Joel Charles here. Let's get started. The topic I'd like to talk to you guys about today would be range management practices for poisonous plants. All right, so a quick introduction to my topic is livestock poisoning from plants is one of the most serious contributions to economic loss in the animal industry. So they suffer this direct loss from death of the actual animals, performance losses, reproductive losses from these animals, and a bunch into indirect costs. So indirect costs would take care of anything from like the machinery needed to eradicate a lot of these plants or remove a lot of these plants, or also like vet bills and things like that to help treat these animals. People have started researching poisonous plants because of the giant economic loss that they can put on a lot of producers, especially during this time period back then. They started researching end of the 18th century all the way into the 19th century, which is amazing. From a study taken back in 1918, it was estimated that it cost about $300 billion annually between 17 Western states that they were losing every year from economic loss due to poisonous plants. Taking that number into consideration now, estimated to be about $6 billion in 2021. The results from all this researching actually helped us a lot to find some of the best ways to cut down these economical losses. And the most successful thing they did is that they gave us a list of management strategies for our range animals to help mitigate these problems. All right, first point that they give us is don't turn hungry animals onto a pasture that could possibly contain poisonous plants. So, one of the most important things to remember about poisonous plants and about a lot of things that are considered poisonous in general is that the dose makes the poison. And that's incredibly true, especially for animals, especially when it comes to ruminants. So, ruminants, when they eat, they have two ways of telling when they're full. And the first one is feel feedback, and that's when parts of their stomach and the rumen get to a certain size, the brain will tell them, "Hey, I can stop eating now. I've eaten a lot. I don't need any more." And it's usually their first way of stopping how they eat. Either that they have chemical feedback where the body realizes that they've gotten enough nutrients on specific things, and due to that, the body will tell, "Okay, slow down, stop eating so much." The issue with this is that because they rely mostly on feel feedback, they'll end up consuming large amounts of poisonous plant material that could result in acute symptoms of poisoning. And usually those are the most dangerous because they are the hardest symptoms to treat. And most of the time, poisoning usually occurs when animals are moving between ranges. So just make sure that you're aware of the plant life in the area. And if you need to, you can definitely isolate your animals before turning them onto the range. Just go ahead and feed them some hay and other forages. So that way, when they go into the field, they don't immediately try and consume everything. The second most important thing is that healthy animals have the highest chance of surviving and dealing really well with poisoning. And so make sure before you even like bring your animals into another area that you make sure that you're feeding them a good amount of minerals and other supplements to make sure that they're actually really healthy. And the best way to determine the health for an animal is actually body condition score. So make sure you take a look at your animals and just take a look and see if they look healthy to you. You know, their eyes are good, their legs are good, they have enough fat on their bodies, they have no like real big issues or anything like that. And also take a look into the history of the animal. Make sure that you just know like basic things like have these animals been traveling recently? Should you take care of that? Are these animals vaccinated so that they don't have to worry about other illnesses possibly getting to them that could be detriment to their ability to recover from being poisoned? Are these animals pregnant, open, lactating, anything like that? Because that could definitely lead to more issues down the line. And just like I stated before, preconditioning your animals is always a great idea. Get them ready for the unexpected, kind of. All right, perfect. And the third recommendation that they were giving us is introduce animals to unknown ranges cautiously. Again, the dose makes the poison. Just kind of have a general idea of what toxic plants you could possibly have in the area and the amount that you could possibly have. You know, just get a rough estimate saying like that end of the field is completely covered in like lupines or things like that, or you know, there's a possibility of getting into pine needles on the side of the field. Just be able to know that And also, you can usually take samples of the poisonous plant in your area and send them to a lab so they can get analyzed. Poisonous plants have varying amounts of toxin in them. So who knows, maybe this year they're not going to be a threat at all, and next year they'll be a completely different threat. So always have your plants tested. That way you can prepare your management strategy for that. And the fourth thing is use your range when plants are least toxic. So plants have varying amount of toxin in them depending on the time of year and also what stage of life these plants could be in. Usually most plants are the most toxic like right before they reach maturity or when they have seeds on them. You could also use different animals on the range during different times of the year, especially when you have like pregnant cows on a specific range that has like lupines or pine needles and things like that. Instead of running the pregnant cows in that range, instead you could run the steers during that time. That way you don't run into the issue of reproductive issues. Or you can take a completely different route and use completely different species during different times of the year. Like with the issue of crooked calf disease, that's when cows get into lupines during a specific time of the year. And it's just due to how the pregnancy cycle lines up perfect with the life cycle for lupines. So instead of running pregnant cows during that time of the year, you could instead run sheep. Since they have a different pregnancy cycle, they'd be less susceptible to any issues that would arise from that. Alrighty. And the fifth thing is we could use animals that are not as susceptible to poisoning. Some studies have shown that some animals are actually a lot more resilient to some specific toxins compared to others. As I was talking to Brian Stegemeyer, who is a pathologist at USU and the USDA branch near campus, he was telling me that the dairy cows are not as susceptible to some toxin as some beef breeds, and so they've been trying to crossbreed them so that they could have more hybrid vigor. And also, like we stated earlier, using animals that are not impacted by the same capacity by poisonous plants. So, like the example I gave earlier, using sheep because they have a different pregnancy cycle would be a smart thing to do. And you could also run other animals like steers, bulls, and things like that in specific fields during a specific time of year to avoid reproductive issues. And the sixth recommendation that they gave us was maintain the range to minimize weed. So the best way to do this would be to have a rotational grazing system. So don't overgraze in specific areas. And the reason why this is very important is actually due to a lot of poisonous plants are usually invasive species. And the best way to deal with these invasive species is by letting the native plants actually outcompete them. And the native plants usually thrive when the environment is as close to a natural state as possible, and that gives the native species an edge over the invasive species that are coming into the area. Alrighty, and the final recommendation that has been given to us is starting to control the poisonous plant population yourself. So there's definitely three ways you can control the poisonous plant population, and that's mechanical, chemical, and biological control. And mechanical control is pretty self-explanatory. That's when you use machinery at any capacity to physically remove the poisonous plants from the environment, which works great at removing the poisonous plant, but it does end up disturbing the land that's there, opening up the possibility of an invasive species coming into that area. Next one is chemical control, and that's using pesticides to target and remove the poisonous plants from the environment. And that one can definitely be beneficial. I think most people go that route in general. And the reason for that is because you can concentrate your effort in a specific area without disturbing the other plants in the area as well. An interesting one that we've been talking about over and over again has been biological control. So like introducing an animal or species of plant that could help remove those poisonous plants. Like we stated earlier, you could have animals that aren't as impacted by these poisonous plants and have them range in a specific area to help you remove them and or help the native population regain their footing and outcompete these invasive species. And all these recommendations come from multiple extension agencies here on the Western United States, from Oregon State, Utah State, and Texas A&M. And these are my resources. Thanks again for watching. Y'all have a great day.